Welcome to Shaun's Reviews. I've been getting a little behind lately, and I have to apologize for that. I took a little trip to visit my best friend out in Pennsylvania, and that got me backed up. So I'm going to do a 4-in-1 review this week, where I'm going to review the 4 movies, since I've seen the last time I put up a video quickly for you. And let's get right to it. The first of the 4 films that I'm going to look at this week is Annihilation. It's a sci-fi film starring Natalie Portman and directed by Alex Garland. Annihilation is probably going to be the hardest one for me to rate this week, because this is the film that's going to most depend on your taste, how much you're going to enjoy it or not. This is going to be a definite love-hate film. It's a science fiction piece, a very, very slow-burning science fiction piece. I don't want to go too much into the plot because that will involve spoilers, but the gist of it is that Natalie Portman is a scientist, former military, former soldier. Her husband, who is also a soldier, walked into this field called the Shimmer, which appeared on Earth a few years back. Everyone who has entered this field has gone missing and not returned, except for her husband, who appears one day and doesn't seem to be right in the head. He doesn't seem to remember her quite right, doesn't seem to remember anything about their life quite right, although there are bits and pieces there. And then he immediately has to be taken to a hospital because he starts having internal organ failure. This prompts Natalie Portman to decide to investigate the Shimmer herself, and that's where I'm going to stop, because that's where spoilers will ensue. Annihilation is based on a book I have not read, although the person I went to the film with had read it, and he let me know that he thought the idea of the book was a good one, but that the prose was not too strong. And he also told me that the film only followed the very general outlines of the book, and that the beat per beat, it was actually quite different. The film also stars Jennifer Jason Leigh, who I haven't seen in a long time, as Natalie Portman's superior. This is a very, very slow-moving movie. It's glacially paced, and that's going to be a problem for a lot of people. However, the ideas intrinsic to the movie are fascinating. I don't know how practical they are. It's not a science fiction film like, say, Blade Runner, which brings up ideas that aren't necessarily real-world relevant right now, but they still have very practical real-world implications when it comes to religion, when it comes to the fact that we will have artificial intelligence soon, when we look at our past and we can, of slavery and such. This is not one of those films. The implications here are almost more a think piece than anything that's going to have any relevance to the real world. But those implications, it's fascinating to think about. This one really gets your mind moving. So while you won't be excited and entertained at every step of the way with Annihilation, you will be constantly in a state of thought going, well, what does this mean? What is this? What's the implications there? And not just as to what's going on in the film itself, but as to, again, I can't give spoilers, but this is an intellectual playground. When you think about what's going on in this movie, it can really get your mind going, thinking about all sorts of possibilities and, what if we could do this? What if we could do that? And kind of spinning off, almost making stories of your own. And that's what makes this a good movie. If that does not sound interesting to you, then what we essentially have is a very slow-paced movie with a finale that doesn't really match the rest of the movie, and you're probably not going to enjoy it then. So if you are somewhat of a playful intellectual, someone who doesn't mind a slower pace as long as it stimulates your thoughts, then Annihilation was made specifically for you, and you are going to love it. Others, think about how much that appeals to you, and your mileage may vary. If that sounds like a slog, it probably will be. If it sounds vaguely interesting, then again, it probably will be. So that's what I think about Annihilation. I'm going to give it all sorts of ratings, everywhere from see it to skip it. I don't think anyone will necessarily want to own this movie, and I don't think it needs to be avoided. But really, this gets anywhere on the skip it to see it on my scale, depending on how much that idea of a really playful intellectual film appeals to you. The second film I'm going to look at this week is Game Night. Now, Game Night is a comedy starring Jason Bateman and Rachel McAdams about a very competitive couple who get friends together, well, they don't say how often, but on a regular basis to play board games at night. Jason Bateman's character's competitiveness extends especially to his brother, who has not been around in several years because he's been living in Europe, making millions, if not, I don't know if it's millions or billions, but a whole heck of a lot of money off of an idea he had for Panera Bread. This brother's played by Kyle Chandler, and Game Night starts when he comes back to interject himself back into their game night, and rather than playing the same old Monopoly or Life or Scrabble or such, he decides he wants to have a really overblown murder mystery party where someone himself is kidnapped. It's meant to look really realistic, and the winner gets the keys to his 1976 Corvette. However, when the kidnappers come in to take the brother away, we find out that this may not actually be a game, something may actually be going on, and that's the premise of the film, is Jason Bateman, Rachel McAdams, and the rest of the crew at the game night initially thinking they're involved in a murder mystery game and finding out that something more real may be happening, and they have to solve it and save Jason's brother. This movie looked to me from the trailers to essentially just be one long TV sitcom piece. And wow, was I surprised. This was actually a pretty dark, well-made movie with incredible chemistry between the actors. Actually, the chemistry is so good, that's really what made the movie. Writer Mark Perez, director John Francis Daley really outdid themselves with really not much to go with. Game Night is a movie that really is better than the sum of its parts. You hear the story and you think, that sounds a little silly. Even the cast, you're just like, nothing that's a huge draw. But when you put all these pieces together, you have a script that knows its premise is silly and runs with it and sort of does the winking at the audience, but without being cute about it. It's never, ever cute. It's like it knows exactly what sort of movie it is, and so it goes out of its way to surprise you, not only by giving very sly winks to the camera, and I mean very sly. We're not talking, the way films have been lately where they practically break the fourth wall and say, hey, we know our movie. This never comes even close to that, but it still manages to let the audience know that they know its premise is very sitcom-y, and that's not the film they want or nor are trying to make. As a matter of fact, what this film reminded me a lot of, if you're a fan of classic films, is the old Arsenic and Old Lace. A film that is so over the top and so goofy, but when you really stop to think about it, so incredibly dark at the same time. And in fact, Arsenic and Old Lace was originally written to be a serious piece, and it was so dark that the studios at the time didn't think that anyone would take it seriously, so the author rewrote it as a comedy, and for that fact, we have a classic today. I could actually, from what I've seen in Game Night, see it having gone through the exact same process, because it seems like all the settings for a very, very dark film are in there. It's almost like the cast was like, no, we're not going to go along with that. We're just going to joke our way through this. I don't care how mean and nasty it gets. We're just going to keep making jokes. And they're good jokes, and they're funny, they're clever, they are... You can tell they are having a great time making this movie, cast and crew alike, every single person. So, Game Night was a very surprising film for me. One, I might actually see again someday, and I don't do that very often with the numbers of films I see. So, Game night gets a rent it from me, a very strong rent it. If it might move into see it territory. The only reason I'm not giving it a see it is because I don't think there's anything in here you really need to see on the big screen. Although some of the establishing shots where they make the buildings and cars in the suburbs and cities actually look like game pieces are pretty neat to see. They did an excellent job with that. So, yeah, Game Night gets a very strong rent it from me. Next, we move on to Bruce Willis's latest film, Death Wish, a remake of the old Charles Bronson film. Bruce Willis plays Dr. Paul Kersey, a surgeon, a very wealthy surgeon who his wife and daughter are attacked during a home break-in, and his wife is killed and his daughter put into a coma. And he decides he's going to exact revenge on the city of Chicago, or at least the criminal element of it, and he picks up some guns and goes out and enacts vigilante justice because he doesn't feel the cops are doing their jobs quickly enough. When I saw the trailers for this movie, I admit I rolled my eyes and groaned a bit because it looked like it was just, going to be gun porn. And right now is perhaps not the best time to be releasing a film like this, given the current climate about gun control in the United States. Maybe this film was actually made more for an overseas market than the United States. If that's the case, then I guess it makes a little sense. But for a United States market, it's kind of a crass movie to be releasing right now. Upon seeing it, it's even worse than I thought. I could see a film like this being a very thoughtful look at gun control. I myself lean more towards the progressive side of the fence. I believe in strong gun control rights. Strong gun control measures. But I try and leave my personal thoughts out of it when I'm reviewing a movie and just look at how they're presenting the issues. And one issue they did present quite well in here, and one that's made me a little more thoughtful on the gun control argument, is that they bring up you need something to protect yourself because the cops can't be there immediately. It's in a rural area, it could literally be 20 minutes, half an hour before a policeman can show up. And even in the city, you've got to hold out on your own for 3 to 5 minutes before you'll have any sort of police arrive on the scene. They do bring that into it, and that is a good argument. That is a thoughtful argument. However, that's about the only thoughtful argument they have in the whole thing. The rest is just disdainfully laughing at the idea of gun control, making points that, you absolutely need an assault rifle to defend your home, without ever presenting a counter-argument, without ever really thinking about it. It's almost like disdainfully laughing at any sort of idea of gun control whatsoever. As far as how is it as a movie, though, this was a film, I still don't have a whole lot good to say about it. It does have some good camera work. NRA I will say that. I really do wonder about that, because that is how over-the-top this movie was as propaganda. The action itself is actually quite sporadic. There's a lot less of it than you would think you would have in a film like this, and it's stiff and kind of dull. The acting is incredibly dull. No one seems to care about their performance in this film, and possibly worst of all is the script, with cliched line after cliched line and corny joke after corny joke, and the corny jokes are not in the least bit appropriate, given the nature of the film. So there really is not much to see in Death Wish, unless you're just looking for some NRA propaganda, because that is really all this film is. I'm giving this one a straight up avoid it. This is one of the worst films I've seen this year. Matter of fact, I think it is the worst film I've seen so far this year. And finally, we go to Red Sparrow, the new film directed by Francis Lawrence and starring Jennifer Lawrence. I don't think there's any relation there, but now that I think about it, I'm going to have to look into that. Red Sparrow focuses on a ballerina growing up in Russia. She has a very promising career until one day during a performance, her leg is broken. She can't dance anymore, so her uncle recruits her to join this special unit of the Russian, sort of a secret service. They call themselves the Sparrows, and their whole job is to go out and seduce people and get state secrets out of them. As she puts it at one point in the movie, "You sent me to whore school." And that's entirely what this movie is about Jennifer Lawrence learning to become a seductress, but also being forced to do the will of the state against her will, and her trying to figure out how to escape from its clutches. It is an interesting spy film. The acting in it is clever, or is not clever, is quite good. The script can be clever at times. I have issues, though, with the tone of the film in that it can't quite ever decide what sort of film it wants to be. 1 minute it'll be an action piece. 1 minute it'll be a very dark, noirish sort of thriller. 1 minute it'll actually be a romance. And nothing in here is quite creative or interesting enough to justify the tonal shift. Sometimes when a movie is really doing something incredibly new, you can justify having all over the place tone. This is not a case of that, though. We've seen this before. We've seen the who can you trust, who can you not, are they actually playing each other, or are they actually falling in love sort of story before. And while this is a well-done story along those lines, I was entertained. I did enjoy myself throughout the film. Coming out of it, I can tell that it's not one that's going to linger. It's probably going to be out of my memory quite quickly, because they just could not establish any sense of greatness anywhere throughout the film. Everything is good, but nothing stands out at all. And I will say, it's also been publicized quite a bit that Jennifer Lawrence is now doing nudity in this film because of the leak of her photos online, the invasion of her privacy, and she decided, well, what the heck, since everyone's seen me anyway, I might as well get paid for it. And this is one thing I do have to give this film credit for. That is absolutely true. Jennifer Lawrence does have 2 nude scenes in the film, and one of them quite long. I was actually surprised. But they go out of their way to make the audience insanely uncomfortable the entire time that she is doing these nude scenes. It's almost like Jennifer Lawrence and the director were looking at the audience saying, "Okay, you want to see naked girls, huh? Well, we're going to make you squirm when you do." I got to admit, I did kind of like that. That was a little bit of a master stroke there. I wonder if it was intentional. Because given the nature of the film, it does link sexuality and squeamishness together quite well, since this is all about people being seduced and not knowing what they're getting into, as being juxtaposed to the people doing the seducing not wanting to be there in the first place. It's about people being forced to essentially be whores for the state, and the people those whores are seducing being screwed over by those whores. It's a horrible situation for everyone involved, and it really, really makes you writhe a little bit as you're watching it. And so I guess, yeah, when I say there's nothing to it, there is at least that. I will remember that the writhing, I don't like this, as I'm sort of sense that you get as you're watching the film. But all in all, it's not going to be one that's going to stick with me as anything special. So I'm giving Red Sparrow a rent it. It's worth seeing, but only once, and even then, it's probably not. It's something more to see out of curiosity than out of how entertaining it is. All right, well, thank you for sticking with me through those 4 reviews. My name is Shaun, and remember, why develop your own taste when you can trust mine? I'll see you next time, and hopefully I'm better on schedule. Thanks a lot.